Hi there, Will here, and today I'd like to take you through my process for shooting a campaign for Adidas. I reckon the best way to do this is in a similar vein to my last fashion video, meaning I'm going to take you through the entirety of my process and show you what it looks like in this context. Starting off with how I got the job. Now, photographic work is a concept that's somewhat shrouded in mystery to me because a lot of the coolest jobs I've ever gotten have come about with no specific context, and no one ever tells you, oh, we hired you because we saw this or that, at least for me. But this one, I can track it down and trace it for you, and it's quite satisfying, to be honest, because I started out working with a creative consultancy in charge of making these Adidas briefs by lighting stuff then on set with my mate Kent, and that turned into an opportunity for me to make a series of portraits, or a mountain of portraits rather, at a launch event for one of the campaigns that Kent had shot. And then that turned into me photographing the people that work at the creative consultancy room studio for their website and showing them, I don't know, I guess that I can make really nice portraits. And then this past February, I got an email from the head creative director at this consultancy asking if I'd like to shoot a campaign. And that's pretty much the direct path of how I ended up being able to do this. I mean, this all took place over the course of a few years as well, so it's not exactly like a copy-paste technique to be able to do things, and I'm incredibly lucky that it happened at all. But hopefully that demystifies things a bit for you, and explains why I'm so stoked on this, because the context makes it so that you can really see that it feels very fleshed out and special to me. Anyway, with that covered, I reckon I'll show you some of the process and give you a bit of a lighting breakdown and cover some of the gear that was used. This campaign was split into two shoot days, one in Johannesburg and one in Cape Town. What that meant was that I needed to have a lighting setup that was easily transferable, theoretically, between the spaces, because there needed to be consistency between the two locations, and that ended up being a bit tricky. The main catch was that the space in Johannesburg was a studio that was built into the VIP section of the Adidas flagship store in Sandton, whereas in Cape Town we'd be using a proper studio. Why that was a catch was because the studio in the Adidas store is a smaller space than a traditional studio, and theoretically had walls that were painted white. And what that meant was that the lighting setup I ended up building was very focused on flagging off spill light from all of the strobes that would be going off in the space, because the references called for a very moody look. And if the walls are white and bouncing light everywhere, everything would be sort of filled in and we'd be in a gigantic softbox basically. So what the lighting list ended up looking like was, taking into account the fact that the space was quite small as well, instead of using polyboards, I had 4x4 floppies to control some of the spill light, and an 8x8 scrim gym with a blackout textile for it, just in case I needed to completely flag off one of the walls. Then the lights themselves all had grids on them, just because that focuses the light quite a bit and makes it so that you're less likely to spill quite as much as you would without a grid on the zoom reflector. And the heads themselves were all monolights to take into account the constriction of space, rather than pack lights with packs and separate heads, which is what I'd use in a normal studio. And the modifiers themselves were 2 zoom reflectors and a 1x4 strip light with a grid on it. The way the lights were implemented was basically one Profoto B10X head bouncing off of the ceiling to give some fill, not necessarily for the subject, but for the frame at large, because this colorama would disappear pretty much without the little bit of fill this was giving, just because of the off angles being used on both of these other modifiers. The one on the right, which was, I don't know, the key light basically, filled in the right side of the talent, but at an off angle so that it wasn't bouncing light onto the background, and also created a bit of moodiness in the face over here on this side. And then one D1 head over here, again at an off angle to the right shoulder, basically, just to give a bit of a rim light with a 20-degree grid on it. And the entire setup was flagged off from where the camera was sitting over here in frame, basically, by 2 4x4 floppies, just to make sure that there wasn't any spill light coming in this direction. Anyway, with that all planned out, we landed in Johannesburg and checked our gear and went to scope out the space, and the walls had been wallpapered with big dark graphics, which kind of ended up sorting out most of the worries about spill light anyway. And now, for the moment we've all been waiting for, the gear breakdown. I used a fairly thorough setup to do this shoot, to be honest. I mean, I was very invested in the idea of making sure that I had absolutely all the coverage I needed, because obviously this is very important to me and other people. And thus, I used my Mamiya RB67 for the majority of the photographs you've seen in this video. There's like one 35mm picture I've shown, but I also borrowed David's Pentax 6.7 with a fisheye lens and used that for a couple of my favorite shots, to be honest. And his Nikon F5 and Nikon D810, which, if you're paying attention, is a digital camera. I shot a decent amount of this digitally because I'm just, not going to mess around where I'm put in a position like this and don't get exactly what they want. And digital gives you live preview, so it could be like, take the picture, make sure it's exactly what they want, then take it on film, and it made a lot of sense. And obviously for me, the film ones turned out way better across the board, and there are some sort of 35 more ones that I didn't get digitally that I really like, but I'm stoked. And I mean, I've always said that if the context arose where it made more sense or made sense to use digital, that I would use digital, and I did. Not that I'm really going to do anything with the pictures, but just so you know, I do retain the capacity to use a digital camera. Oh, and obviously my Sekonic L308B to meter the light and make sure it was doing what I wanted it to do. And yeah, that's pretty much everything that went into this on a gear level. The gear was pretty important in terms of the final picture, but isn't something I focus on. I mean, being competent in using one's camera is a very important part of being a photographer, but that is something that I got comfortable with a long time ago and don't really particularly focus on. It's more about just using them to make what I want them to do, which I feel like I accomplished here. I'll show you a bit of a montage from the studio space in Cape Town, and then talk to you about the post work, because there was a decent amount of post involved in this. It's got a mind-blowing twist. say a decent amount of post work is mainly because of the amount of stuff I ended up having to remove from the frame, especially in the Johannesburg context, just because of the constriction of space. So I spent a decent amount of time removing lights that intruded into the frame and extending the background. And I mean, in the fisheye shots, obviously the fisheye lens would get the entirety of the studio in, so I sort of did some Photoshop background magic there. But nothing that was really too heavy, I suppose, theoretically, outside of extending backgrounds and cleaning up skin a bit. And then in terms of the look, basically just a contrast boost and an initial color balance, because thankfully, as a result of the consistent color across the board, even though there was variation throughout, I could sort of live in a space where I did a base grade and then just tweak from there, as opposed to having to attack everything one by one. In terms of changes with the lighting setup between the Johannesburg scenario and this one in Cape Town, there were none, basically. I mean, everything that was done in Cape Town was to match the setup that was built in Johannesburg. The specifics in terms of equipment changed just because I had more room to work with. So instead of monolights, I used pack lights. And instead of 4x4 floppies, I used polyboards. But the only other thing outside of that that changed was that the roof was too high in this proper studio to use it as a bounce. So we set up an ultra bounce on C-stands and just used the C-stand arms to mount it. Technically, what one should do is use a swan neck to mount a scrim gym or an ultra bounce like that, but didn't have swan necks on hand, so we just did it with the grip heads. The main takeaway in all of this, really, for me, is just how incredibly grateful I am to have been able to do it. I mean, on a level where I'm talking about working with Room Studio and the progression that took place there, but also sort of how YouTube ties into all of it, to be honest, because I've had a lot of interactions in the recent past where I've been working with cats on set who I haven't worked with before, who are very, very amazing, internationally lauded photographers, and they know of me before I work with them because of this YouTube channel, which is bizarre to think about, because to me, I don't know, I recognize that there are people that watch these things, but I also don't like to think of it in a way where it's like I might actually run into them in real life, or that there are a number of them, theoretically. But what I'm trying to say is that it sort of all ties into each other, and I'm recognizing more and more, not that it hasn't been the case, but that at least for me, my photographic practice is actually quite tied into what I get up to around here. Like, it's not like I make photos specifically to make YouTube videos out of them, but a lot of the motivation to get out there and make things is that I get to share them with you, and motivation to try new lighting things and all such manner of things is because I get to share them. I mean, my goal for the year has just been to focus on photos and videos. I think I mentioned it, maybe not necessarily on here, but in a Buy Me a Coffee vlog, and it's been going well, I reckon. It's been scary because I've said no to a decent amount of assisting work outside of the 3 jobs with photographers that I really wanted to work with. And hopefully I managed to keep that vibe going. We're heading into winter around here now, which means less in terms of the in-season photographic work and more video time for me, which is immensely exciting, to be honest, because I've got a stack of things that are in the edit that I reckon you'll really enjoy. A number of adventures, and yeah, thank you so much for watching this. Endless thanks to the multitude of people involved in making this. I don't think I could list them all by name, but off the top of my head, Ash, Jamie, Eden, David, Kirst, even though Kirst wasn't there, Tim for picking up when David couldn't be on set, all the captains, Matt, Chizé, Jamie, and Toomey, the stylists. Anyway, I'll see you very soon.